I'm Maya Kaathryn Bohnhoff, and I'm going to be reading to you today from my science fiction slash fantasy slash magical realism crossover novel, Chickpea and the Fabled Tree of Destiny. It began life as a novella that was published in Amazing Stories magazine back in the day. And my agent asked me if I thought I had more story for these people because he really loved the characters. And as it turns out, I did. This is a teaser for the book. Most wizards have staffs, wands, or mediums. Chickpea has a tree. In the city that was San Francisco back in the day, the Kingdom of Embarcadero is under siege. Elvis, alcalde of Potrero Taraval, wants to steal its secrets, mysterious outsiders want to expel its citizens, an ancient and sinister force threatens to devour their souls. Salvation rests on the slender shoulders of a young wizard named Chickpea and his unlikely allies, a red-haired Chinese girl, a ghostly tribe of Mission Indians, and a small fir tree named Doug, which lives in a pot, by the way, in his hotel room. So here I'm going to let Chickpea tell you more about himself. This is from the second chapter, his diminutive self, and it takes place right after he has learned of the death of his parents at the age of 10. And here is the first time he heard what he calls the Whisperers, who play a rather important role in the novel. I think that was the first time I heard the whispers, while I was grieving all over Mrs. Lopez Alvaro. I thought it was Mrs. Lopez Alvaro at first saying Ave Marias in my ear, but it wasn't her. Her mouth had closed up shop and gone all grim and sad. The whispers didn't mean anything to me because I didn't understand what they were saying, but I heard them as if they were air being sucked through the Lopez Alvaro's actually working window fan. But the window fan wasn't on that day because of the fog, and fog doesn't whisper. I thought it might be rain and that the sky was crying for mi madre y padre, but there wasn't any rain either, just a fog, a wu pesado so thick and so still no sound could move in it. So I lay in Mrs. Lopez Alvaro's overly padded lap and listened to whispers I didn't understand or even really hear all that well. I decided to believe it was mi madre y padre, whispering to me from the Abha kingdom, and that somehow that made me feel a little put back together. When I pray, I still see mi madre y padre with a 10-year-old's eyes. They were day and night, mi madre with the sun-colored hair and pale skin, and mi padre with midnight locks and skin like burnished copper. I take after mi padre mostly, but he always said I had her eyes and her smile. I suppose I am what you'd call a legacy. A pretty sad one, if you ask me. Well, there was someone to do my coming-of-age right with me, after all. There was Mrs. Lopez Alvaro, who sat with me at the table when I had turned 12, and gave me my first coffee in a hand-thrown cup, and spoke to me about the grown-up things, choosing mates and raising families and finding something to do in the world. I had my coffee with cream and no sugar. And then I packed up my stuff and moved north, away from the neighborhood and away from any place where I could look up and perhaps see the sad old building where mi madre y padre had died for a stick of furniture. I stayed for the Day of the Dead that year, my 12th year, and I painted my face like a skull, and I carried the torch, and I prayed for the departed ones. I sat up late and listened to whisperers say nothing to me. Then I moved up on into the hollow. Now let me tell you that I was a sorry citizen at that time. I had officially come of age, which meant two big things. One, I was now responsible for furthering my education because two, in 3 years I'd be looked at to choose my calling, and I didn't have the veriest glimmer of one. Maybe this doesn't seem like such a problem. I suppose wherever you're from it might not be. But here, where there are so many jobs that need to get done just to keep decay from taking over the kingdom, it's the most important thing you do before you're grown up. It's what you're growing up for. I knew this as well as anybody, but here I was heading toward the big 1-5 with no calling in sight, at least none I figured I could pull off. I was no kind of cook, so following in mi padre's footsteps was out of the question, and I couldn't grow a thing to save my sorry life, so there it was. At 12 in the hollow, I was a lonely solo with nobody but street kids to run up against. Oh, and I had this cat. Well, I can't exactly say that I had the cat, but we shared my cozy. He was a cat of many colors and bad attitudes and smells. We were not what I would call friends, but we got along okay. I called him Buñuelo because he looked like one of those fat little buns that come out of bakery ovens around Christmas time. He sure as hell ate better than I did, mostly because I always brought dinner. He hardly ever returned the favor. I could talk to Buñuelo about the whisperers. I still couldn't hear them clear enough to make out one word of what they were saying, but they were there on and off, kind of like a bogu mist. Sometimes I thought I saw them too, the way you think you see something out of the tail of your eye and the something jerks your head around, but there's nothing there. One thing about cats I can surely appreciate, this is that they are good listeners. You can learn much about the art of listening from a cat. Buñuelo never laughed at me when I spoke of the whisperers. He never gave me pitiful looks like Mrs. Lopez Alvaro, or swatted my behind like Mr. Lopez Alvaro, or called me that jing-bing ghost boy like my so-called friends and acquaintances. My teachers at the Wiz consulted the fiche and took my questions about the whisperers to the Holy of Holies, but I never got more from them than the same sort of pitiful looks I got from Mrs. Lopez Alvaro. Buñuelo even purred when I spoke to him about the whisperers. Sometimes he also gave himself a bath, but I knew he was still listening. I suspect we were friends after all, just too macho to admit it. Buñuelo disappeared the year His Majesty became king. I suppose I should have seen a sign in this, but I didn't. I just saw that I was really alone this time. When I got tired of being alone, I had two options. I could go into the street, where other kids would call me names to remind me how little I was, or I could go to the Wiz, where I could hear all sorts of important stuff that might further my education and put me in mind of a calling. 9 out of 10 I went to the Wiz. Problem was, I had to go into the street to get there, which meant I'd arrive late for my classes with a sorry attitude and a few new cuts and bruises to show for it. One night, after coming home from the Wiz with even more bruises than usual, I decided I was sick of it. I addressed God and the whisperers, saying, "O Lord, and you whispering guys, whoever you are, know that I, Cicerone Dell, am mighty tired of suffering abuse day in and day out from people who think it is somehow their right and responsibility to cream me every time I budge outside my cozy. If there is anything you can do about this state of affairs, together or independent, I should surely be much obliged. Thank you, Amen, and Inshallah." The next morning, I met Hoot. He's sitting up on top of a bunch of packing crates that are choking the open end of the alley below my cozy. Red hair, duck-back slick, Levi's black boots with those nasty little chains around the ankles that mean I'm bad. And he's wearing this jacket, this black leather jacket, and it's like 80 degrees in this stinking alley, which is steaming like a crab pot, and this dude's not even breaking a sweat. I gotta admire that, even while I'm thinking, this Jake's gonna kick my sorry little chickpea butt from here to the wharf. "Well," he says, and pulls these shiny shades down from out of his hair as if to see me better. "Well, if it ain't his diminutive self, what's shakin', Chickpea?" Okay, could have been worse. I mean, there's a lot of worse stuff he could have called me, and he could have called me nothing at all but just comments to kicking my butt down the alley. I figure this is not so inauspicious, and I say, "I'm shaken." "No kidding," he says. "Why's that? Did I scare you?" Voices from the sky kind of, weird me out. He tilts his head sideways like one of those windowsill sitting pigeons and says, "Not that what I hear. I hear voices from the skies pretty vanilla to yourself." Damned if I know what to say to that, because I surely expected to be getting kicked by now. So I just squint up at him for a few, and then I start up the alley like I'm bored with the whole business. "Hey," he shouts, and starts to climb down off his crate. I know I'm in for a kicking now, and I try to hurry, but this Jake's fast, and he comes down in front of me before I can make the street. He's twice my size, easy. Well, okay, so I exaggerate a little, but he's big, and he's got his hands on his hips, and he's staring at me out of these shiny, scratched-up shades, and I'm really shaking now because I can't read his eyes, and I just suddenly realize how important that has been to my survival up till now. "So what do they say?" he asks me. Since I expected to be flat on my back, perusing sky by now, this question comes as a great relief. I ask back at him, "Who?" His head waggles, and I swear I see his eyes roll behind the shades. "The voices from the sky, Chickpea brain. What have you been chewing on here?" I've been chewing on the inside of my left cheek, but I wax all sassy anyway, and I say, "Who says they come from the sky? I never said they come from the sky. I don't know where they come from." "Well, what do they say?" "Stuff," I say, And before he can ask the inevitable, I add, real secret stuff. If I tell anybody what it is, there'll be hell to pay. Well, I'm not about to tell them I don't know what they say. Okay, but what kind of stuff do they say? I mean, do they do mahjong tournaments so you win a lot of swag? Do they tell the weather? What? I make something up on the fly. Well, they told me I'd be meeting you this morning. He seems real interested now. Yeah? What else did they tell you about me? To hell with secrets, I figure. They said you'd be a real neon dude, #1 Jade, too cool for words. I'm lying like I got no conscience, which is not true. I got plenty of conscience, but I also got an appreciable survival instinct. Anyway, this works. This Jake is smiling at me, grinning at me. He likes this stuff. Where are you going? The whiz? He asks, to which I nod. Okay, and he turns around and starts to walk with me. So, he asks as we stroll, these voices from wherever they're from, they guy voices or girl voices? I fabricate that they are girl voices, as I suspect this will hit big with Hoot. He is called Hoot, he informs me, because the singular thing his madre laid ears on after she'd popped was his padre crowing like a hoot owl. The girl voices are a very big hit, and Hoot walks me all the way to the whiz, the net effect of which is that I arrive with no more bruises and abrasions than I started out with that morning. Hoot is outside my cozy every morning for over a week, and then on and off after that. Got so it didn't matter whether he was there or not. My bruises and abrasions healed right up and were not added unto. Needless to say, I was sincerely grateful for this, and thanked both God and the Whisperers accordingly. So that's part of the end of chapter 2 from Chickpea and the Fabled Tree of Destiny, whose name is Doug. And you can purchase this lovely ebook at bookviewcafe.com on my author page. Thank you very much for listening to my reading.